So much for joining me to talk about something that's really important to me. My name is Atia Abawi, and I want to talk about Afghan women today. Afghanistan has gone through a lot in its history and its recent history in the last 40 years. And the people that continue to struggle and the people that continue to need to be heard, but unfortunately are being silenced, is Afghan women. I want to talk about what their situation is now. Since August 15th, 2021, we've seen a huge deterioration in the rights of Afghan women and girls, their condition, and their social and political status. After 2 decades of progress, everything essentially disappeared in a moment, in an instant. When I was reporting in Afghanistan, the years I reported there, I saw all these rights that were gained by Afghan women, and I always said that those gains were very fragile, and in an instant, it was shattered. It has been now today 541 days since the Taliban banned teenage girls from school and have also banned women from continuing university education. Over the past year and a half, we've seen an escalation of restrictive policies and behaviors towards women. Afghanistan is also starving, literally starving. The country is in the grips of what the United Nations says is the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and an estimated 90% of its households don't have enough food to eat. We are seeing parents selling children in order to feed their other children. That's what's going on in Afghanistan today. I want to show you a video. This is from Euronews. This is not my report, it's someone else's report, but she does an incredible job in giving an update on Afghan women. This is from fall of 2022, so it's a few months old, but it's an important watch nonetheless.
Hello, this is an Afghan girl. I'm 18 years old and I was born in Kabul City and I live in Kabul City. I would like to tell you the truth and the story of mine, which I want the whole world to know that, which I want the whole world to hear that and understand me. I'm a girl who had the dreams to be changed in society, to support girls and youth rights. And you know, I wanted to do my best as a girl, as a social activist, so I did. I started my activities since I was 14 years old and I became a member of national and international organizations. But unfortunately, I didn't know that one day all of these dreams that I have will be ruined, will be destroyed.
When the Taliban took control of Afghanistan's capital on August 15, 2021, it claimed the war was over. But for some, the fighting was about to start.
A society without women is a dead society.
Women who knew what was at stake based on the Taliban's previous time in power had a message to their rulers.
We are not the women of 20 years ago. I have my dreams and I want to work for my dreams. They almost do everything against the women. So I'm a woman, I'm a girl, and I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to cover my face. It's my identity. My life won't have any value if I just stuck in my home. It's stacking in your home is worse than being killed in here.
For the last 20 years, women had been playing a crucial role in building a new Afghanistan. They were members of the judiciary, social and public sector workers, artists, who believed there was no limit to what they could achieve until the Taliban returned.
My goal was to become Afghanistan's president one day, or vice president. We should eliminate the gender considerations from Afghanistan. This was my idea. But unfortunately, my hopes and objectives have turned to dust.
Mona, not her real name, introduced us to a group of friends in Kabul shortly after the Taliban takeover. They agreed to speak to us, but we chose not to show their faces to protect them.
From that night, we couldn't sleep because we used to hear so many calls coming because you work with the foreign country, you work with the NGO, So they are searching for women who work with the NGO, so you have to burn your documents. We just took all our documents in our washroom and washing them and burning them, because our is apartment, and if burning, everyone will understand they are burning something.
The group is a rather accurate picture of what Afghanistan's women had accomplished.
I was a prosecutor and checked cases daily. Women used to come to me and I would check and try to solve their problems.
This woman is among the hundreds of female members of the Afghan judiciary who say they are now targets, hunted by suspects they once helped convict, many of whom were members of the Taliban and have been freed by the group.
It was my duty. According to Afghanistan's law, they're criminals. According to the law, I processed these cases. But today the government fell and there's nothing left, and we're the accused and we're the ones facing threats. I sold some of my home utensils and donated the other part. And now I'm moving from one place to another. I'm even going to my relatives' homes, but they're not happy to host me, not even my dear friends. They don't like it because I'm under threat. They don't want their families to get in trouble because of me.
The last time the Taliban was in power in Afghanistan in the 1990s, women had virtually no rights. They couldn't work or study or even leave the house without a male relative. And despite the group's promises that things would be different this time, one of the first measures the militants took was to erase the faces of women from billboards and shop windows. The Taliban also prohibited women from appearing on TV. Presenters and reporters were ordered to cover their faces. The message was clear. The very sight of a woman was an insult. And that was just the beginning. Women who persistently took to the streets in the first few months of the group's new rule were eventually silenced. This photographer, we will call Mariam, was among them.
With the butt of a gun, they hit me on the back of my arm. My phone fell and I wanted to take it from the ground, but the Taliban told me not to take it and to leave. I'd filmed the demonstration from the beginning to the end on it, and I didn't want to lose the events I'd filmed. I wanted the whole world to see what had happened, but they said no, don't take the cell phone. But I bent down and grabbed it. That's when they hit me twice in the arm with an iron bar.
Mariam wasn't detained that day, but the group of friends she was with was threatened. They say the fear and the physical pain don't compare to the impact the arrival of the Taliban has had on an entire generation of girls who, for the past year, have been deprived of an education. The first announcement came in October, when only boys and younger girls were allowed to resume classes. Months later, the group said girls would be able to return to secondary school in March this year, only to send them back home again hours after reopening classes. But things got even worse when activists started disappearing. Tamana Zariaba Pariani, Parwana Ibrahim Kel, Zara Mohammadi and Mursal Ayar were taken by men claiming to be Taliban members. The group denied detaining them, and the women were finally released a month later. The question of who is to blame for what's happened to the over 15 million women of Afghanistan divides.
Look what government did to us. What a cheap deal they did to us. We worked more than 10 years for this government, for building this country. And now we lost everything.
بالاخره به کدام سو میره و این مذاکرات این همه
What happened to the negotiations and what happened to all the money that came to Afghanistan? How did the United States, the world's superpower, invest in Afghanistan and then hand over power to a few motorcyclists that defeated B-52s?
Today, America has a $5 to $10 million bounty on the heads of al-Qaeda leaders. If someone finds them, don't you know, they're in Afghanistan. Come take them for free.
Mariam speaks of this crisis as an opportunity for the country to reckon with its own shortcomings.
The main culprits are us, the people of Afghanistan. We were silent when we saw corruption in the Republic. We were silent when we saw suicide at Kabul University. Maybe because we didn't put aside religious prejudices. But I think, and I'm sure that our current generation has come to realize that ethnicity should be in one corner and religion should be in another. And our humanity and nationalism are coming together. I'm happy I'm part of a generation that thinks and is aware of this.
At the time of the completion of this film, most Afghan women were prohibited from continuing school past 7th grade or returning to their public sector jobs. They were also banned from sports and discouraged from appearing in public without a male relative. Euronews chose to produce this film featuring only Afghan women in order to do our part in not letting them disappear.
Everything is done and over here for girls and especially women. They cannot have their dreams, and these dreams are burned. These dreams are not alive anymore. This is really heartbreaking. This is really sad for everyone.
I appreciate you taking the time to watch that clip, that film by Euronews. It is our job to make sure that the Afghan women do not disappear from our mine site, because the worst always happens to Afghan women first, but then that spreads, that leads to something else. And eventually it does come back to us. Afghanistan remains the only country in the world where girls are banned from going to school past the 6th grade. Women are restricted from working outside of the home, except for a few sectors and places. There are no women in the cabinets, and there are no Ministry of Women's Affairs anymore, effectively removing women's rights to political participation. And the Ministry of Women's Affairs was changed into the Ministry of Vice and Virtue, unfortunately. So there is no political representation for women in Afghanistan. Women are now required to have a male chaperone, a mahram, when they are traveling more than 48 miles, meaning an Afghan woman, if she did want to leave, she couldn't leave unless she had a male relative with her. And let's remember, this is a country that has experienced more than 40 years of war. Some of these women don't have male relatives that have survived the wars. They don't have a father, they don't have a brother, and they don't have a husband. So some of these women are virtually trapped inside of their home, even if they do have male relatives. They're also required to cover their faces in public now. These rules limit women's or girls' ability to earn a living, access healthcare and education, escape situations of violence, and exercise their rights. They can't go to a doctor without having a male chaperone. Women doctors are fading away. When you can't have a woman who is educated, you can't have a girl who is educated, you can't have a woman who goes to university, a woman who becomes a doctor who can help other women. And a lot of male relatives don't want their female relatives going to a male doctor. The mahram, the male chaperone requirement, impacts every day of life, from a woman's freedom to go buy some bread and to meet the basic needs of their family, to their ability to influence decision-making in the home. So a lot of people quite often ask me, why would the Taliban pick women and restrict women? It has nothing to do with Islam. In Islam, an education isn't just a right, it's a requirement and it's an obligation. So really, stopping women and girls from having an education is anti-Islamic. It goes against the religion, but we have to look at the age-old adage. So why would they do this? Well, they say when you educate a man, you educate a person. When you educate a woman, you educate a family. When families are educated, you've educated the villages, you've educated the provinces, you've educated the cities. And the Taliban do not want an educated population, because when you have an educated population, you have a population who knows their rights, and then they will fight against you. So they're easier to control, especially when you control the women. For the men, it gives them some aspect of control in their lives. So the men will then look down to use their power against the women in their families, in their villages, in their neighborhoods, as opposed to fight up against the Taliban. So that's my answer whenever someone asks me why the Taliban would do this. Even when Muslims ask me, because they know that it's anti-Islamic. The mandatory face covering is a step in erasing women from society. For a woman to go to the market without a mahram is a substantial act of bravery, and these women are still trying. They're fighting for their rights, and they're screaming and hoping to be heard. So the fact that you're watching this right now means a lot to them. So I appreciate that too. Thank you. They live in fear that one day they will be stopped and beaten for the act of just buying groceries without a man, for going out to get some fresh air. They've been banned from the parks in Afghanistan. The one women's park that I remember in Kabul as well, which was a park just for women, even that has been shut down for women. A lot of people say, well, at least the Taliban brought some peace, less bombings, less fighting. And yes, there are less attacks happening in Afghanistan, but we have to remember that's because they're not the ones fighting anymore. They were the ones behind a lot of these suicide bombings that we saw, the car bombings that we saw. But as conflict between the Taliban continue, there's ISIS there now, we are going to see a bit more fighting, but it's not going to be as extreme as we saw with the Taliban against the former government and the international community. And again, the safety comes at an expense of personal freedoms, and this price is too high, and the highest for women. And the country representative for the UN said this, quote, "For many women across the world, walking outside the front door of your home is an extraordinary part of life. For many Afghan women, it is extraordinary. It is an act of defiance." So what can we do? That's another question that's asked quite often to me, and it's a really hard question to answer because there's very little that we can do except to lift their voices and listen to their voices. Search for their voices because they're being drowned out, but they're out there. They're screaming to be heard. Go on social media, follow these women on Twitter. You know, you're listening to me right now, and I appreciate that, but they're the ones, I hope I'm just the messenger that leads you to them, because they're out and they're talking. They have videos, they're taking these videos, they're being captured by the Taliban, they're being taken in. You saw the video where at least those women were released. There were other women who were found dead, unfortunately. Don't forget about them. The media will forget about them. Our government will forget about them, but please don't forget about them. Reach out through social media, as I said. They want to talk to you. I've talked to them myself. Their stories are so important to be heard. And one big thing that we can do is to push organizations, that's NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are still active there, and other governments that are active in Afghanistan who have relations with Afghanistan, even our own government, they still do talk to the Taliban government, to ask them to do more. And by asking them to do more, tell them to send females, tell them to send women to represent their organizations or their governments. The Taliban need to see that women are powerful. Women need to be a part of their society. The Taliban want a successful government. They want a successful society. They want their society to thrive under their leadership. They need to know that if they want any kind of success in Afghanistan, that can't be done when half of the population is held prisoner. I want to share one more video, and this is coming straight from Afghan women and their voices, and it's from UN Women, and I hope you will listen. Thank you.
قبل از ما یک زندگی راحت داشتم، به دفتر می رفتم، راحت کنار همکارایم، دوستایم و همکارای مردم وظیفه اجرا می کردم. اولادایم به مکتب می رفتن، به هر کدام آنها یک آینده روشن آرزو داشتم که شاید یکیشان معلم، دکتر و یا انجینیر شوند.
چقدر روزهای سخت. وقتی قبل از آگوست وقتی از خانه بیرون می شدم اصلا حراس نداشتم، اصلا ترسی نداشتم به اینکه کسی در مورد چادر ما صحبت میکنه، کسی در مورد حجاب ما صحبت میکنه که حجاب ما چرا رنگ سفید است، چرا سرخ است، چرا زرد، یا در مورد از اینکه کسی استادم بکنه بگه میشه موبایل ما چک بکنم که در موبایل تو چی داری، تو کی هستی، تو کجا هستی. اصلا حراس نداشتم. برای من زندگی بعد از آگوست سال قبل زندگی کابوس بوده.
ځکه زه بدون د محرم سفر نسم کولای او زه خپل د فامیل لپاره هیڅ غړی نه لرم چې زما سره سفر وکړي، نه ورور لرم او نه پلار لرم. زه به د چا سره سفر وکم؟ نو د خپل کورنۍ سپورټر هم یم. نو په دې حالاتو کې زه څنګه کولای سم چې بدون د محرم
اولادایم که دخترایم همشان در خانه ماندن، دروازه مکتب بر روی همگی بسته شده و هر آن آرزویی که برشون داشتم همیشه از بین رفتن. و وقتی به طرف چهره مایوس اولادای میبینیم باعث از این میشه که زندگی برام بسیار سخت و هیچ احساس خوب ندارم.
و همچنین از جامعه جهانی توقعی این را داریم که صدای زن افغانستان را بشنوند. امروز خیلی خیلی نیاز دارن زن افغانستان که تا صدایشان شنیده شود و همنوایی شوند.
This is usually when I open it up to questions. Since we can't be in person to talk, I ask you to ask those questions to Afghan women. Find them on Twitter. They will be happy to respond. They want to talk to you, and it's a great way to learn more about what they're doing, what they're living under, and what we can do to help. I want to end this on saying that a lot of people talk about the weakness of Afghan women, and I can't tell you how wrong they are when they use that term. Living in Afghanistan, seeing these women, I want to tell you they are some of the strongest women I've ever met in all of my travels, and they continue to have to be strong. Let's support them and be their strength as well. Whether it's women in Afghanistan, women in Iran, women in America, we need to stick together and lift each other's voices and not forget about each other, because when one of us suffers, we all do. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, to watch, and I hope you got something from this today, and I hope that you will reach out to Afghan women and not forget them.